Hello and welcome back to Valoranting, the weekly Valorant show where we cover everything from esports to cheaters crying into their pajamas. I am happy to be joined this week by both DDK and Velly. If you have seen either of these gentlemen in their respective arenas, they're tremendous esports personalities. DDK, the CSGO extraordinaire, Velly most recently at the 6th Invitational for Rainbow Six Siege. Gentlemen, I hope you're doing very well. We've got a packed show. DDK, how you feeling, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I just came off of casting Twitch Rivals North America. That was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how this game develops as an esport, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Absolutely. We've been following along. Velly, how you doing, my dude?
I'm doing great, man. I almost forgot what it was like to work in esports again. So I'm really happy to be here right now and talk some Valorant, man. Let's get it going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's we're in probably the longest drought, I'm sure, for both of you guys that you've been in for a while, as far as the travel and getting around to events. I definitely miss that aura of whatever arena you might be participating in. But we have some exciting news to talk about right out of the gate, and that is cheaters. They're kind of upset to lead into this topic. Cheaters have been punished past the beta. They seem to be surprised at the fact that they were able to come in, cheat during the beta, and then have their accounts remain banned, hardware ID banned all the way through. They've been a little upset about that fact, and they've been posting about it. So, again, for a little bit of additional context, the Riot anti-cheat has been a big source of both frustration as well as memes, as it's a very intrusive, but it's finding these guys who are trying to mess with matches. And it doesn't matter if you picked up a cheat off some forum somewhere or you're paying for the high level private cheats. These guys have been getting banned a lot, and we're just kind of running through a bit of a montage of all these guys who are talking about hardware ID bans. Probably some of the most I'm not going to say oppressive because that's not the right word. It's they're not messing around. They're going out there and they're messing people up. Right out of the gate, I'll start with DDK again. How has your experience been since launch with cheaters in games? Have you seen a lot? Have you been experiencing them in your games?
I haven't been able to clock a huge amount of games just yet, but it has been a pretty good experience so far. The experience, I mean, the only thing that the only complaint I have about the experience really is just that there's no competitive just yet, and the unrated queue with so many new players, I think, is a little bit more difficult. And so that's the only complaint I really have. But in terms of the cheaters, I'm really happy to see that they're taking a much, as firm a stance as can be possible, because given the stakes in this game with matchmaking, how it's going to be way more integrated into the competitive experience than in CSGO or something like that, they definitely need to do something more. And I feel like that's what's happening. Like, we're getting like the hardware bans. I love it. It's like music to my ears.
Absolutely. And Velly, I mean, looking at some of these responses, obviously some upset young gentlemen, probably maybe overstepping a little bit. Do you think that there's any room here for Riot to walk back maybe some of their strategies? Should there be any quarter given to these guys?
100% absolutely no. Get him out of here, man. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And also at the end of the day, if you're pushing a product and it's going to generate some type of income, some type of profit for your company, you don't want to run players away that happen to face cheater after cheater after cheater. I see it every day on multiple other titles. So the good thing is, yes, get them out of here. Don't bring them back. And if you want to bring them back just for fun, laughs or whatever, put them in a server to where they can all play against each other and cheat all day long. But I, for one, I mean, you look at other titles out there. You look at Call of Duty. You look at Rainbow Six. Look at CS:GO at a point in time with the little spin bots. Like, that's not something you want to do. And actually, those spin bots drove me away from the game. So, hats off to Riot. Get those guys out of here and don't let them come back.
There's been a lot of talk about cheating as well in other titles, and I mean, Call of Duty is a big one. Modern Warfare has been absolutely rampant with cheaters since day one. It's interesting, man. I hope that the free to play trend moves towards the hardware ID ban, IP ban, SMS ban it all. Don't let these guys come back. But it's always fun to see them upset about spending money on cheats and then immediately being banned. So always good to see. Moving on, we have some esports news, I guess, as Hiko joining 100 Thieves as the first person, the team captain for what will eventually be, I assume, 100 Thieves competitive roster. Hiko had the announcement himself to say, let's watch it.
I've been given the go-ahead. I can tell you the big news. Chat, the big news is I am going professional in Valorant. I have signed to a team. That team is no, it's not Cloud9. I've been joining, I signed with no, it's not Liquid either. I signed with 100 Thieves. I think it's, some people probably had an idea, but yes, I have officially signed with Team 100 Thieves. And
there you have it, 100 Thieves from the man himself. Has to feel good if you're Hiko. I mean, DDK, I'll get to you in a second, as I'm sure you've probably got the most to say about Hiko as a player. He's been on a journey, all over the place. Obviously a mainstay in CSGO for a long time, and recently with Valorant has been on the come up. But I want to talk a little bit more about 100 Thieves as a roster. What do you think 100 Thieves is driving towards here for this roster, bringing Hiko on, and what does he bring as a captain? DDK, did you hear me?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was cutting out there. Right. Okay. A little bit of a hiccup, but that's fine. Hiko's an interesting one because I think that's one of the things that he definitely brings to any roster, any squad, is an enormous degree of experience. He's one of the older players, of course, and in terms of keeping up in CS:GO, he has been around, like he has stayed around in the tier 2 scene, and he's able to kind of foster young talent. That's kind of something that he's been pretty well known for. I think most notably was when he was with Team Liquid, and they managed to get a really deep run. In fact, this clip is from that tournament where they had Simple on the team, and you can see Simple in the clip there. Where and he could have brought Simple under his wing, and at that point, Simple was this untamed talent. Like no one could really control him. They had people in from the region that he's from. Like there was a really well-known coach and previous in-game leader and super well-respected player called Blade, who was the guy that was supposed to be able to like rein in a Simple, but he couldn't do it. It was only Hiko that could really do it, and he made Simple feel like he was a part of a family and all of the rest of it. So he's one of those father figures. He's a great captain for a team, and that's specifically why he's been picked up, I think, because he's going to be able to bring obviously loads of players, like whoever is coming to the roster who's a young and upcoming talent. He's going to be able to habituate good behaviors from them, help them to understand what a good team culture is. All of these things that you really want to condition from an early phase, he's going to be able to do that. And I would imagine that the other benefit is that he is someone that has had a long-standing stream and is an influencer, understands how to work his brand. These are like important ideas, because I think this is part of the discussion with a team like 100 Thieves. Which way do they go? Do they want influencers? Do they want, because you can make an argument there because of the fact that they're a content house, basically just pumping out loads of content, that's a priority. And also with Valorant, how do we know who's a good Valorant player yet? It's up in the air, really.
Yeah,
that's a great point. I actually want to hit you with this, Velly. Is 100 Thieves? They're influencer based, essentially. A lot of Fortnite players. What are your thoughts on the organization and where they kind of where they've been taking it from the beginning?
Kind of piggybacking off of what DDK was saying. Yes, Hiko, he has a following when it comes to streaming and content. Yes, he's been a big name throughout the beginning of this decade. But my big question is, okay, now that he's a content creator and he's going to be the captain of 100 Thieves, who, as an org, the clothing line, their content game, is through the roof. Is it going to be a distraction or is it going to be a good thing? Me personally, I hope that it's a match made in heaven, because Hiko knows what it's like to be in the spotlight. So if he's able to bring a team around and really focus on the gameplay aspect of that, and not too much on being a personality, too much on being a brand, too much on just streaming and content, I think this team is going to do well. But it all depends on who they're going to pick up.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question I'm thinking of now. Is DDK mentioned the relationship with Simple, and obviously having someone like that who's able to guide young players. 100 Thieves kind of trends towards the younger side. They like guys who are present on a stream, do all the social aspects, and having someone who has both a stream as well as the pedigree and the history of being able to kind of wrangle young players. I think that if they choose the right guys, and sometimes they go off the reservation, they've done so in the past. They don't always focus on following, but it is important for 100 Thieves. So my big question, and something that they'll obviously be held accountable for eventually, is what kind of team is this going to be? And we just don't know because it's only Hiko. So from a bedrock standpoint, having him on board is going to be huge. And let's talk a little bit about the comparisons now with what 100 Thieves is kind of setting themselves up for with Hiko in comparison to other teams like T1, Sentinels, these guys who have signed players from various different spots. I think the big one here is T1. They've got Brax. Skadoodle now has rounded out the roster. This is a serious team. Do you think 100 Thieves has the available talent, DDK, to I guess compete directly with T1, which I imagine would be the benchmark in these early days?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really interesting question. I think that T1 are taking a risk because even though I feel like it's hard to say that you would be taking a risk on players like Skadoodle, AZK, and Brax in particular because these three players have shown extreme amounts of versatility and have all of the competitive experience you could possibly want. We again, we don't know what the best Valorant player looks like just yet, and there's a lot of things that I think throughout the show we're going to discuss that will, I think, start to talk to the nuance of what might make a really good Valorant player in the future. But they do have a lot, as you mentioned, there's a lot of Fortnite players that are super young, very talented on the 100 Thieves roster. I would imagine that there are probably going to be some that want to make a jump across. I don't know if that's going to be the case, if they're thinking about that, if Hiko's going to be the guy that gets to say so in terms of, if there is somebody that wants to make that leap internally in the team from one game to Valorant, if that's going to be one of those, younger Fortnite players. And then the Hiko's going to have to try to assess whether they get it or not. But at the same time, we're in this place with Valorant whereby it's a game which, the CS fundamentals are present. So, the players like the T1 guys are going to obviously have great advantages there. However, how much of the CS fundamentals might get in the way when we have these extremely quick situations happening where all these abilities are flying around? You have to make on-the-fly adaptations with just really good intuition. Is that going to be a help or a hindrance in the longer term? And when they have all this expert intuition, they're carrying over from CS, because there's always that kind of first generation, like when the first generation of a game really gets there, it tends to, it feels like they have an edge over the people that have come across and transitioned from another game. So we've seen this in CS:GO. It took a few years, but then we got those first generation talents up and running, and now they're extremely dominant. So it's that's definitely something to kind of weigh up. And I don't know which way they're going to go with it. They could easily have like a huge roster if they wanted, and they could just make it influencer based and then just have like a starting lineup and have a bench and maybe an academy team. There's all sorts that 100 Thieves could do, but I definitely think they'll be able to source players that can compete. I think already looking at, sorry, it's a very long answer, but to finish the point, if we already look at the TSM lineup that was without their full roster in the Twitch Rivals North American finals between T1 and TSM, I think it was clear that T1, even though they're very good, they're definitely not indomitable at this point.
Velly, any response to what DDK said?
No, I agree with him entirely. And plus, when you compare the two, I actually applaud 100 Thieves for taking their time and picking out their captain and seeing who really the top players are in this game. Because let's be real, DDK knows CS players can go to Valorant any day of the week and automatically adapt. They know how to click cast, they know how to control recoil. But the thing is, we really don't know who the top players in this game even are. So this T1 signing, yes, they can have the advantage right out the gates. They can smack everyone up. But how are they going to be once the meta evolves, once Valorant starts becoming its own title and people stop separating it from Counter-Strike? That's going to be the biggest question to me. And I still feel like we're a month and a half away from even seeing that. So 100 Thieves, if they're listening right now, take your time, really scope out the talent. Don't be afraid to look at names that aren't that big in CS and that comes from other games, because those might be your diamonds in the rough.
Absolutely. And I mean, with Fortnite, I think there is some crossover there. You mentioned something, DDK, during your answer there about how when things are all going crazy and CS is kind of measured, you have an expectation. It's like it's a chess match. Everyone knows the moves. But with a game like Valorant with all these different abilities going off, I think for people playing Fortnite, specifically on the 100 Thieves roster, Elevate has been tweeting a lot and streaming a lot of Valorant. Someone who has high level Fortnite experience outside of some of the recoil mechanics could likely translate that mentality, that keeping your head cool and calm under pressure. It's all an open book at this stage. We don't really know where things are going to go with 100 Thieves. So let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about Reyna, the newest agent. We talked about her last week during the kickoff show for the newest agent, this being Reyna. She's been a bit interesting to watch. A lot of chatter about her being overpowered. And you can see here in some of her kit is just absolutely bananas, especially with vision and the ability to ramp up damage. She has a solo stim kit that she can just unleash at any time. And if she's off and getting kills, she can become a big force and affect games. So early on, I know it's only been a little while since she's been out. But from what you've seen, Velly, do you think that maybe Riot is putting in these intentional overpowered characters? Raze comes to mind. She was in the beta, obviously, but it's a free-to-play game. It's going to cost a little bit of cash to get these new agents eventually. Do you think that this is something done by Riot to, gain interest in the game and maybe gain interest in pushing some sales for Reyna and her various cosmetics?
I mean, it makes sense. I've been fortunate enough to work in multiple esports as a commentator, desk host, what made you avid? And a lot of strategy behind devs' mindsets are we're better off putting in a type of character in the game that's overpowered to where we can tweak her after a while, seeing how top players play with her to get her at the right level rather than characters coming out that are vastly underpowered. I mean, you take a look at Jet now and not really, people don't use her when you're playing seriously. You know what I'm saying? But also, I mean, I might have a hot take. I don't think Reyna's overpowered at all. And from what we saw in those clips, it looked like most of those players they were playing against were kind of like bummy when it came to their positioning and not having on headphones. I mean, there's no way you can just run the map with Reyna. I've had great games with Reyna, but never like that. So, I mean, let's be honest. We're not in rank. We don't have an MMR set right now. Oh, this is the clip I was talking about. These players are clueless. This doesn't happen. This is one of those moments where you say Xbox recorded that and you keep moving. Like, look at this. So no, Reyna isn't overpowered. But yes, you know what? I'd rather have a character come into the game to where they're kind of overpowered to where, okay, it's easy to see where we can tune him or her and make it to where she's balanced for just overall gameplay. But yeah, I mean, Reyna isn't overpowered if she doesn't kill you. So get that out of here, man.
That last clip was kind of egregious. I'm not going to lie. They're pretty clearly bought. But I wanted to kind of take that sentiment and channel it towards you, DDK. Do you think this is another situation where it's just a disruptive character that's kind of messing with people and it's kind of, you have to learn to play around her? Do you feel that she's overpowered in your experience watching or playing against her?
I think there's just like a huge element to understanding what you're up against that changes a lot, because with Reyna, like, you're going to be up against a bunch of abilities from the get-go. People don't really necessarily even understand how to distinguish the sound cues as to what's going on. So if she's popping these abilities, you don't even know what the sound cues are even mean because you're not used to it yet, then that's definitely going to be an inherent advantage regardless of how strong the agent is. You don't know what the agent's doing. So that's one thing for sure. Like at the beginning, there's always going to be an adaptation period where people will start to figure out, okay, how does it actually play? What are the cues I have to actually be worried about? Like, everybody knows, what's this? Like, everyone knows, that sound cue. They know exactly what's going to be coming. Now I have to be worrying about, an updraft. And, I need to look at these certain things. So there's that element. I think in terms of her kit, I think the most contentious thing that I've been hearing most consistently is her layer ability. And there are definitely some interesting aspects to it, because I think firstly, it doesn't blind your teammates. So that's like really one of the biggest ones, is it doesn't blind your teammates. So you kind of just throw it out there and everybody can just charge into it, and whoever's like holding that angle has to either shoot it immediately and pray that that kind of displacement of their own crosshair that's not the death of them, or they have to just run away. And otherwise, whole swell of their enemy team is going to be running in and taking position quickly. So that seems to be one of the things that people think is most contentious. I don't really know if any of the other abilities are that overpowered yet. It's definitely super strong to overheal. Let's say like in a pistol round where you have a ghost, someone plays a bait for you, you get the trade kill with Reyna. Now you've got the ghost and you've got effectively like 50 shields and 100 health. That's pretty strong, but I'm not convinced yet. The only arguments I think that I'm interested in right now with Reyna is does she just detract value from other similar choices in duel lists? Because that's like that opportunity cost thing. That's the only thing where I may have an issue. Like, is it actually really silly to get Reyna if, let's say, she's got a flash that maybe has more utility than Phoenix and is maybe more reliable, and she has more initiation potential than a Phoenix? You know, like if that's the case, the Phoenix becomes irrelevant because of Reyna, then I have a problem with it. But I think she's actually, I think the layer should be looked at a little bit. I don't think that maybe your whole team should just be able to run through that as well. But I don't know how they would balance that, because then maybe it'd be completely useless. It's hard to say at this point, but I think they need to give it another few weeks for sure before they nerf her.
I agree. The way you're able to shoot that out the sky and you're not blinded, I mean, that's the fix right there. And like you said, I mean, 10 out of 10 times, I'd rather pick Phoenix over Reyna. Phoenix heals himself. Phoenix has a reliable flash that you can't shoot out the air. Phoenix has a wall. Phoenix does it all, okay? The only thing that's ridiculous about Reyna is that once she gets her ult, okay, yeah, she shoots faster, cool. Yeah, you know, she generates health. I feel like if you take away the disappearing act away from her, okay, that's balanced enough. Other than that, other characters in the game have way better ults and her, way better utility, and she is simply a mechanic-based agent. So, hey, if she doesn't kill you, she's useless.
I think the question is around Lear as well, because at the very least, if you're gonna have something that, like, looking at it is what they put in the patch notes, but really if it's on your screen, it's going to blind you. So the way that it can be used as an offensive weapon and DDK bench doesn't blind your teammates, that is, I think, the only situation where a flash of going off in the face of your teammates doesn't blind them. So I think there's a bit of a design question there as to why would that not affect your teammates. So, well, you know, there's some time. We have to wait and see. As you guys both said, it's early. She is disruptive, and it's going to take some time to see where she kind of slots in to the overall meta, I guess you could say, which is great for a transition as we want to talk now a little bit about compositions. One last as we move into this one is the utility aspect. I was expecting Reyna to be more of a focused utility player. Right now, the utility is kind of dominated by specifically like Cypher, Brimstone, Omen is on the come up as well, as well as Breach. I really expected Reyna to have some more utility to her. She kind of reminds me of Sombra a little bit, but let's take a look at rather the current meta for compositions. And talk a little bit about Viper on the other end of the spectrum. She's been in the game from the very beginning, and she is just straight up not getting picked in any competition, and she's not finding her way into any meaningful lineup outside of a few niche picks. DDK, do you think that Viper is underpowered? What does she need, and what is preventing her from being picked over other anchors?
I think she needs people who know how to play the game to to play. I think part of the issue is that Viper, for me, strikes me very much as an agent that is going to be a huge benefit when you're defaulting, because she's able to have utility that can cut off line of sight in enormous ways. And she can just pop that throughout the entire round. So she can deny vision to strategically very important moments. And the thing is that at the moment, we have a lot of people playing in mixed teams. We don't really have a super competitive elite level esports scene just yet. So we don't have a lot of people who are actually investing time into actually creating a framework and a structure to their offensive side to actually make good use of her. That's at least kind of my thinking. I actually don't think that she's underpowered. I think it's just more about that people just haven't really figured out how she fits within a framework of how you actually want to run your offensive strategies just yet. And because there's so many options to do other stuff, people are going to pick the low hanging fruit first in terms of strategies and tactics and so on. And they're going to want to think more about less about positional advantage and information advantage, and more about how can I get position by trading some abilities and just opening up some situations to get some kills. So I think map dependency is definitely another thing as well. There's definitely some maps where she's a lot more useful than others. So I don't think she's underpowered. I think people just don't know how to use her in an offensive strategy yet.
I know that Mixwell recently had a couple of thoughts on Viper, and we actually have that here. So let's see what Mixwell has to say about Viper.
Thoughts on Viper in particular? Is she very viable depending on playing around her, or is she very map dependent?
I think she's really underrated. I think on bind defending, she's one of the most OP champions by far because you have to go through the one way on short or bathroom. And even if you go through, that one way works for you as a retake tool as well because they cannot play behind the smoke. They have to play forward. So it works both ways. On bind, I think she's OP. In the other maps, I think only on Ascent, I think she's viable because you can use the wall to cut off mid and then the fights are not long range anymore. They are close range. But the only thing, I'm the only pro player that plays Viper, I think, because her ulti sucks. Her ultimate sucks, in my opinion. They have to like do something. Well, they have to do something with her, man.
Her ultimate sucks. I believe is the one thing I kind of take out of that because there was a moment early in beta where I was like, man, this thing lasts forever. Like, what is this overpowered? But once you start to play around it and understand that it's just a big green cloud, you can still kill her. It's the vision aspect is obviously a big bonus for her as well. But there are some. I guess I misunderstood is the word that he used, but I think she is just too inactive. Like she's not an active ability character. Like you have to put her abilities in different spots. It's not as flashy as Jet, not as flashy as Brimstone, obviously either. So she's in this weird position. Velly, do you think that she's a bit misunderstood? Do players understand what Viper brings to the table?
Yes, when I look at Viper, I look at an agent that could really lock down a site like a cipher, okay? And so we see a lot of meta happen, a lot of strategy that's used where people use like all the smokes in their arsenal to get onto a site. But the thing is with Viper, okay, she has so many traps that she can set. So by the time they even step foot into site and get past those barricades, they either have health or just one shot at that point. So a lot of people, they don't want to think that way. And also I want to point out the fact that Viper is the most least flashy character out there. I mean, even her ult. Now, maybe if they were looking at buffing her in the future, maybe some of her gas clouds can take away damage permanently, not just a DK effect, but just make sure her ult keeps that decaying effect. But other than that, I agree with DDK. People don't know how to use her properly. She's not that flashy. And once you start to use her as a trap agent, I feel like she can really annoy lineups.
Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the old.
Sorry,
go ahead, DDK.
Cut you off there. The fact that like he was talking about just how powerful the poison orb is on just for the retaking capacity as well. There's a lot of people aren't even thinking to that level just yet about stuff like that. But he's completely right. Like if you've gone for a short plant and then there's that one way smoke on top of the boxes on short, you actually and you don't have U-Hold live round, it's basically over at that point. Like retake utility is a huge thing, and she can actually have so many lineups for retake utility from basically anywhere because you can throw that thing really far. So yeah, I just wanted to like add to that point that Velly was making there. Definitely people haven't really researched her uses very effectively just yet.
That's why he gets paid.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the disinteresting part. And Velly said she's not flashy. Like I don't want to have to go on YouTube and be like, okay, where do I have to line this up to be a good Viper player? Like I have to look at the, I have to like, I got to look at the potted plant and then just to the left of the air conditioner and then shoot my freaking wall across the map. And that's my utility usage for the round, and that is great for, like you said, DDK in the esports aspect, knowing how to place your wall for retakes and use your utility for retakes. But for the common character the common player who's like seeing the Jets and the Phoenix running around having great times, it's like I don't want to play Viper. No, why would I do that? So let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the overall agent compositions. It's more of the same. And can we go back to that chart that we were looking at a little while ago? Sage, Sova, and Cypher are like the players, as well as I would say Brimstone and Breach. You're going to see them a lot, especially in competition. Sage has been nerfed. Cypher's been not necessarily nerfed, but he's been kind of tweaked a little bit. Sova hasn't been touched at this stage. Are we still kind of okay with what we're seeing, DDK, with the pick rates and that kind of thing? Is it getting a little stale in your opinion?
I actually think that one of the great things about this game is actually you can pretty much have any kind of composition in reality, as long as you understand like how the agents synergize together. You're pretty much good to go if you have a plan around that. I think it's really weird to me still to see so little Breach, because Breach is just incredibly strong in
He's
terms of the team
amazing.
play
Yeah.
potential, of getting you into any areas. He has 3 abilities, all of which can actually push his, your teammates onto positions and take away positions from the opponent. This is so strong. But again, it's just like a lot of the agents are kind of misunderstood right now, because we're not at that point like with CS:GO. We're like in CS:GO in matchmaking, you can be playing like you can be a gold nova in matchmaking, and people might even just know like the A Mirage set smokes. Like that's actually a thing. What is the equivalent of that in this game yet? There isn't just yet, but over time, I think people will begin to understand like the basic things that are particularly good and strong that you can kind of default to. And we're not quite there yet. So there's this huge flux. I think people are just kind of picking what they feel is comfortable for them and their play style. And that's kind of where they think first. I would say though that some of the more like some of the teams we saw from Rivals that are kind of bigger cores, like they're actually a general core, that they were going a little bit beyond that, which was really cool to see. But what I saw consistently is that you can make a lot of stuff work in this game, and that's actually where the nuance is, and what really makes this very different to CS, which is more about playing it objectively in the most correct way possible. In this game, there's loads of different ways to play things correctly. It's just more about how well you do that, and how big your playbook is, and also from the perspective of being up against an expansive playbook, how quickly you adapt. That's a really interesting fact about this game, is that adaptation is huge, and I think very difficult.
Absolutely. Velly, I'm interested to know, do you think that at this stage it's going to be more important for players to focus on individual characters and what they can do, or what individual lineup or entire lineups can do as a cohesive unit? Because we see some like flashy jet players, we see some other different, high level individual players. But when are we going to start to see those, like DDK mentioned, those set smoke kind of execute level strategies on a regular basis that just everybody knows about?
Well, first off, there's always going to be those one-offs, okay? There's going to be those people that use the most underrated guns or characters in any game out there because they're just gods. You take a look at Mixwell of Viper, you look at Hungrybox and Jigglypuff, just things that just doesn't make sense to people, but they're so good at doing that, it works, okay? Now, me personally, I feel like it's so early in the game. There's everything you see now is not going to exist 2 months from now, okay? Like all this meta is going to go out the window. So what I'm looking at now, the composition right now, yes, we see a lot of Sage, Brimstone, Cypher. Me personally, I think Breach is the best agent in the game. So throw him in there, and then after that, you just have a fragger. I think that it's really important, and it's really funny to hear an idea coming from a guy that comes from the scene of Counter-Strike, and I'm from Rainbow Six. I personally feel like, yes, smokes are going to be big in this game, okay? But what's more important than that? Intel. Intel is better than everything else in any other game you can have. Once you have Intel, you have the one up on the opponent. So having a Cypher, having those type of players on your team are going to be really smart. So I think Sova and Cypher, we might see them just as staples. I mean, that drone, the little Legolas bow and arrow, everything that they have in their kit is able to put your team at a serious advantage with just minimal risk. It's that easy when you use them.
I think Cypher's a permanent pick just based on his E alone. It's just I mean, the amount of information he's able to gain, and that's been since beta. DDK, any follow up on that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting things in terms of Cypher and Sova, and also like how they play differently as information gathering agents. One thing that I found particularly interesting that T1 were doing actually with Cypher on Bind is that on the attack, that where Cypher typically is going to have definitely less value than I think is fair to say than on the defense. They were using the tripwires in a way where normally when you're defaulting, one of the reasons is obviously you want to sort of provide the pressure so that you don't allow your the opponents to kind of push some extremity of the map. You want to have as much map control as possible, so they have as least information and you have as most information as you can. And so what they were doing is they were placing their tripwires in a way where they've been defaulting all the time, but suddenly they stopped defaulting, and the tripwires kind of are the safety mechanism insofar as if they're actually gonna push these extremities and kind of call our bluff. Let's say we're all going to be around. Let's say it's on Bind and we're all around showers or short and just kind of hiding. And we don't have that pressure or presence on the other side of the map. The tripwires actually provide that safety mechanism where it's like, well, if they haven't actually move past those tripwires, they won't get the information that they need to know that what we're doing right now. So we don't actually have to run the default, and we can have everybody in one place. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea as well. for Cypher's tripwires that I don't really see used. That's not a common thing a tactic that's been employed. But
Yeah, the
in terms
inverse.
of
Like where are they not versus
exactly,
where
yeah,
are they? Yeah. Yeah, it's
and the
really
same thing.
man. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it just adds that extra layer to the Counter-Strike fundamentals. But then, if you also look at T1, what they're good at doing on their defense, I noticed that it's extremely hard to poke and prod them aggressively, and so you kind of push into situations where they want you to kind of overcommit in to their defense, and they're very good at preventing you from getting these little picks. And when we saw Wardell, who's incredible with Jet, and maybe that's something we'll talk about a little bit later as well, is Jet and how good Jet is, and the operator and all this kind of stuff. They actually got absolutely crushed in the first game because Wardell was trying to be aggressive, but he couldn't be. So he had to get that Sova switch because you need safe information in this game. You have to get as much safe information as possible. So Sova then suddenly became extremely important in the vacuum of that map and that matchup and the style of the team that they were playing against. So I think it just kind of goes to show, like, I completely agree. I think you always need either a Cypher or a Sova. But again, it can depend so much on the style of opponents that you're up against, and there's so many different ways to play lineups and compositions that it's actually super fun because every team is a different take.
And the one thing
Yeah,
about newer games, whenever a top team, I'm so sorry to cut you off, Moses, but
not at
the
all.
one
Not at all.
thing, whenever a game first comes out, you always see the top team doing something, and then everyone else just copies. They don't think about trying their own composition or strategy. It's just, monkey see, monkey do all day until that variety just comes out and someone wants to be unorthodox and opens up Pandora's box.
Yeah, I think that the set idea that things are, I don't want to call them stale, but there's so much to learn still. I mean, beta was it felt long, or didn't feel long, but it was a long-ish beta. The game's only been out for a little while. I do truly believe that we're still in the infancy. We have to be. The game's brand new. There's no way that everyone's figured everything out by now. But just the bedrock. I'm waiting to see where the floor is versus the ceiling. What is going to be your standard issue tactics that everyone needs to know, and that is still being discovered. And I mean, a lot of that comes with synergy as well as maps, and hopefully as the map pool increases and diversifies and things get tweaked, that also affects who gets picked and where, and that makes for more interesting concepts because. Man, it feels a little bit not. I'm trying to avoid the word stale when it comes to maps because I mean, there's the maps are boring still. I mean, Ascent is nice. The maps are a little. I want more variety. Like they have these really genius level designers and stuff like that. They've got all this different talent from all over the place, but they just don't seem to have They don't have the same feel, flair. They're freaking cramped. We talked about this last week. Ascent is a nice step in the right direction. But I would love to see some more diversity, a little bit more freedom to have these agents and players showcase themselves or find out new ways instead of being fucking trapped in the split mid hallway on the attacking side, just waiting for all the paint shells to stop exploding. It's obviously been changed. They've changed up mid a little bit, so split is getting there. But I would like to see some changes in the maps as well. I want to talk now a little bit about we're talking about agents and compositions and meta and stuff like that. We've, rivals aside, has been seeing some competition, and we here at Valoranting have been keeping our eye on a certain set of teams, specifically 2G4L, Prodigy, Royals, High Ground, and Fish 123. We've had the honor of talking to both High Ground as well as Fish 123 directly, both players and coaches. And we've kind of have this kind of big draft board about these unsigned teams. So I want to talk a little bit about these guys and kind of get your individual thoughts on either your experience watching these teams or who you expect to see kind of being either coming in as organizations or being taken off the board if you're a team looking to get signed. So let's take a little bit of a look at 2G4L. This is a squad that has won the Fnatic Open as well as some Valhalla events. This is a fully finished team that has been making some waves, and they've been playing quite well. I'm interested to know from what you've seen, DDK, how is this team kind of shaping up in your mind?
So I haven't got a lot of experience with this team in particular, but one thing I will say is that this game is actually is going to be a game whereby the mechanics, of course, will be important, but it's going to be about having the most well-developed playbooks and having the best and most varied protocols in dealing with various things that your opponent might throw at you. So in that sense, one of the things about CS:GO and to use the word stale a little bit in CS:GO, like that, you'll have the innovators, and the innovators will always be empowered whenever changes happen. There's a new map, whatever it is, because they'll be able to work it out and the best ways to do things. And this kind of also goes back to the kind of first generation player versus the people transitioning who may have baggage and certain ways of thinking that may be cemented. But you have these kind of these guys who are the innovators who have the advantages. And so we're going to see a lot of names we haven't seen before who've actually put the time into really thinking about Valorant and how to play Valorant, and they won't be as biased. And I think that we're kind of starting to see that. And I think that those players will be more empowered in this game for the long term, because I think that the way that the meta will shift and the sheer diversity of tactics and strategies we'll see in each individual round and map and in tournament for years to come in this game, I think it's going to shift all the time, because CSGO is a much more static game in terms of the variables in comparison to this game. In this game, every player is going to have to be able to be intelligent and be able to understand on the fly how to respond. Because let's not forget too, like, we have MR12, so you don't get as much time to adapt. So you have to adapt more quickly, and you have to adapt to more things that could happen. It's really difficult, I think. Like, so far from what I've seen, like it's always that story of adaptation in a match. And oftentimes I've seen failure more than I have seen success in that sense.
Velly, with I guess this unstable nature of the current scene, if I'm a team that's performing well, like a 2G4L, a Prodigy, Royals, is my sole focus just getting the check at this stage, getting in? Because there's some rumors floating around about some pretty big checks. And if I'm 2G4L, am I looking for the best fit, or am I looking for the biggest payday?
I'm a ex-pro gamer. I don't look for the check. I look for just being the best out there. So, if that's on their mindset, God bless them, because it's not going to end well. But looking at these teams as a whole, though, I think that they need to continue shooting for the stars. I think that they started off on such a big disadvantage compared to the top teams. I mean, let's be real. Valorant is kind of like a basketball game, a street basketball game. Everybody sits on the sidelines, and the captains are your biggest names, and they pick all of their friends and all the other big names.
Yeah.
So they have the advantage in the beginning. So from the get-go, they come out the gates as the best. But these other teams that are coming up, I followed Fish 123 and Prodigy more than the other teams on this list, okay? Now, Fish 123, they're consistent. They're winning these qualifiers. These weekly tournaments, they're on top every single time. You look at their Wikipedia page, all you see is first, okay? Now, these teams, like DDK said, I think in the long run, they're going to have most of the advantage out there, because they had to work their way up. They had to compete against, the big boys at the park. And once they're able to do that and the meta changes, and this comes full circle to everything we've been talking about all day today, I feel like teams, you would be a fool. You would be an absolute fool, or you would just be ignorant on purpose if you don't seriously look at these teams, scout them, and see how they are in scrims against other top teams and their consistency in these tournaments. Because if you don't, you're going to miss out trying to chase the next big name.
I love the street ball analogy, mainly because it's exactly what's happening. Like, everybody wants the professor, but nobody wants nobody wants the guy who's just like, I got the rebound, or setting screens, or whatever you want to call it, like the utility guy, the glue guys, I guess.
And that's the thing, they overlook it.
Yeah, and people will overlook. But I think that's why the flashy big names are kind of being so focused on right now. As you kind of look through these rosters, there are names that stand out. Obviously, the Mixwells of the world, Scream, Defran from Overwatch League, Sinatra, and even on Fish 123, this is a team of mostly UK players that were relatively unknown. And DDK, let's talk a little bit about Fish 123, as Velly just brought them up a minute ago. These are guys that have been winning a lot. We talked to Sliggy last week. They have a very professional approach do you think that this is a team that, even though they don't have that flashy player, that an organization might look at these guys and say, all right, let's take a look at it. They're winning. We want to win. And what better way to increase the stock of whatever organization by coming out strong?
Yeah, it's actually a super interesting question for a couple of reasons, and it kind of goes back a little bit to the 100 Thieves discussion before, whereby teams, especially now, you're weighing up a sure win versus a little bit of a gamble. And a sure win is, okay, well, we pick the big name, like just like you said, the influencer, the person that's got an established brand. We know we can rely on them. But ironically, I would say it's actually not the truth. The only thing that you can rely on is the audience that they've created. But in terms of how this game is going to develop, I actually would expect a lot of the names that have been playing to drop off over time. Even names like Scream, potentially could drop off. There are reasons why some of these players didn't make it in professional Counter-Strike despite the skill that they displayed. And from some of the games that I've watched already, a lot of these big names, even some with experience, not someone like Mixwell. Mixwell is actually an incredibly good player. Like, he's very smart, very mechanically gifted, and has the right attitude. He's actually just a superstar. But there's a lot of the other bigger names that we do have come to know from CS that I think will drop off because they do still make fundamental mistakes. I think I honestly don't know that Scream will have a really huge future in this game as a professional player. I think as an influencer for sure, but I still see him making a lot of like really basic mistakes. I don't know if it's because he's just having fun or what it is, but if he's in the finals of a competition and he's giving up a 1v1 when his team has a really clear 2v1, stuff like that, like that stuff shouldn't really be happening. So kind of tying back into your original point, I think Fish 123, as you say, they have a really professional attitude. Sliggy's focused hugely on developing their playbook, and they're all looking at the game like it's a different game. They're all trying to be good Valorant players, and they're constantly every day asking themselves the question, what is a good Valorant player? I'm going to kind of move towards that. And they have to all, and they're all doing the requisite levels of thinking and studying of the game and putting the time in. So I would actually want to gamble more on a team that shows that they understand things strategically and tactically and are actually taking the effort to build that playbook and actually to analyze other teams and doing that kind of work. That's where I would put the investment, especially if they're getting results right now, because I do think that the players, Ling, Cryptix, Artist, Soulcast, Nekis, mechanically, they're good enough. I think they're good enough. I actually don't think that if you got players that are 10% better mechanically, which you could probably find, I don't think that's going to matter. I think you need a squad like Astralis. Astralis is going to be a good example here. You need to find 5 guys that are on the same page in how they think about the theory and the fundamentals of the game, and then actually build that relationship over time. If you have a team that swaps in players, swaps out players, I think it's going to be a disaster in this kind of a game. I think you need a roster to stick together for a long time. And if they're this good this early on and are building that confidence, I think they are a great investment right now.
Velly, anything to add on that?
DDK is hitting it all on the head right now. The man's a hammer. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, he said everything I wanted to say, and I just want to say, if you have, even for the people out there that are ignorant to names that just aren't that big, if you have 2 brain cells and they accidentally rub together, it's going to tell you to look at a team like Fish 123. Like, a thought is going to come out to say that. So, yeah, keep an eye on these guys. I genuinely love Fish 123, so I hope they go far. But the big names you see, like Scream and the rest of them, he's played with even my man Hiko from Rainbow Six, so I've been watching him a lot too. At what point to that natural skill just not keep up with the rising talent? And it's going to be a rude awakening. I'm not saying to Scream because I love Scream, but it's going to be a rude awakening to people down the line.
I think that there's something to be said around, and I don't know, man. I've followed him from like the Titan days and stuff like that, so I'm aware of where Scream has gone and where he's come from and stuff like that. But I'm going to dial it back again to the street ball analogy. He's the guy that's chucking threes and not playing defense. He's not, it's just like the guy who's like, I want to hit the shots, and then I'm gonna be I'll be off somewhere, or whatever. But I think that maybe, obviously, this is a guy who's tremendously talented, and this is the where we get into that 95% versus 99%, like that very small margin of you can be excellent, but you can also be irrelevant at the same time based on whatever that 5% gap in the skill is. And we're not there yet, which is why I think we're seeing so many of these names being prevalent and being present in the early days of Valorant. But there is and I use this term in the most positive way possible. There are some sweaty dudes out there who are grinding that nobody knows about. And we're not going to see them in rivals. I'll leave this one for after the break, but we're not going to see them in rivals. We're not going to be seeing them on these mixed teams with high-level Counter-Strike players. They're going to be that guy who's like, this guy's certainly cheating, and there's no way around it until you see him on LAN, and it's simple. It's the next simple, whoever that might be, the Valorant version of simple, where it's some 17-year-old who we have never heard of that is just going to be the name and face of the next little while. So we didn't get through all the teams I wanted to talk about. We're gonna revisit some of these guys. But for now, we're going to throw it over to a commercial. And when we come back, we're going to go real deep with DDK and Velly on Twitch Rivals. It just completed over the weekend, and there's lots to talk about. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Valoranting. I'm WTFmoses, joined by DDK and Velly. We've been chatting through some of the most pertinent topics from the last week in Valorant, but none more so than the actually just completed Twitch Rivals $200,000 tournament that just went over the weekend. DDK was involved and Pansy was as well, so we have lots of stuff to go over. $200,000, 72 teams, 360 players, 8 different tournaments across a bunch of different regions. And this is not the first time we've seen these big Twitch Rivals tournaments come in. It's kind of been a mainstay. There's a lot of influencers that are driving interest in these things, and Twitch obviously puts this on for their partners, in addition to, I guess, Riot and whatever sponsors they can kind of get together. But the most interesting part about this tournament for me was just the different regions and kind of showcasing different areas that we don't typically hear about right now. We've been kind of focusing in Valorant on North America and Europe. But we did get to see regions like Latin America, Japan, and Korea, who I'm very interested in talking about. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the competitive nature of the tournament. We talked about this just before the break. Rivals is a great product. Cloudfuel and the boys who run it do a great job with it. But it is a show match, and that's kind of where I set my expectations. There's some competitiveness. But DDK, actually, we'll start with Velly this time, since I've been starting with DDK every other time. Velly, do you think that Rivals is a competitive environment at all?
In a way, yes, but ultimately no. Rivals, they're trying to find the perfect combination between, big name content creators and professional players, or just really top players in the scene. And when you put that together, you find a mismatch, and they have to find a happy medium between the two. I don't think that they found the formula for that yet. I think it's going to be coming soon. But sometimes we're in for a treat. Mix well in the finals. That finals game was actually entertaining. It was competitive. But outside of that, you really don't see much. But at the same time, it's good to see your favorite content creators like Myth hit the finals and play against pro gamers. Show the road what he has. And he shocked the hell out of me. So, no, it's not really competitive.
People sleep on Myth, man. Like, he had a couple. He had some issues not issues, but I mean the expectation versus reality kind of hit him a little bit in Fortnite. But I mean the guy is a gamer. He can get out there, and I mean he's definitely more on the influencer side now. But yeah, I mean the showcasing of streamers in the aspect of a moderately advanced fun or serious fun, whatever you want to call it. But DDK, you were watching it and obviously involved and seeing the action go down. Were there any surprises to you in this tournament overall? You're muted, by the way.
Mike. The power of it.
We lost DDK briefly, but that's all right. I mean, we'll sort out the technical issue here shortly. But as far as the Rivals environment, my biggest experience with it was with PUBG. The big issue that with Rivals is like this, and you kind of touched on it, Velly, is this mishmash of pro and not quite pro. There's some people who are like, oh shit, I've got Rivals in 3 hours, I better start playing some Valorant. And then there's guys who are like the grinders who have been, are using Valorant or using Rivals to showcase themselves. And DDK, you get your mic back going?
Is this thing on?
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna turn it back to you. With this mishmash of influencers and players, were there any surprises to you during this last Rivals tournament?
So yeah, I think as Velly said, it's like it's kind of like, it is a show match, and ultimately the competitive integrity is in question in that sense. However, we did get to see obviously T1, and so there's a lot of pressure on their shoulders because of the only like big core from North America with all these big signed names that, and they've also been playing together for a while already. Before the signings, happen as they did, as the players, of course, are friends and know each other and knew also that these signings would be going down before the public did. So they've been playing together and practicing. So lots of pressure on their shoulders. So it surprised me actually how well TSM did. Where we saw Myth. You guys were mentioning how well Myth did. He was standing in for Hazed, which would complete the TSM roster, and Hazed is the in-game leader. So I was actually very impressed because I was more or less like looking at, okay, the guys that have the big cores, what are they going to be bringing to the table? What have they been working on? What compositions are they going to show us? What map preferences? And I think it was really cool to see that with that core, even without their in-game leader, we saw Wardell stand out like a star with the operator. And that was really interesting because he was the only player that really played, at least in North American matches. He's the only person that was playing Jet. And one of the ways and he's also showing, I think, that one of the ways we have to think about this game, I think Sinatra also did this with Sova, that we have to think about the game in a way of, okay, the operator, it's a sniper, sure, anyone can collect it and pick it up and use it or buy it, but only certain agents are really going to be able to really show the potential of specific weapons. And so I think Wardell did that with Jet, and it took T1 to kind of shut him down, and then we saw the adaptation come through, and they were very competitive after that point. So that's what surprised me the most was, I think, how well TSM were able to play with Myth as a stand-in, and how well you can build an entire strategy around a player like Wardell and just having him roam around. It kind of looked like Counter-Strike in that regard. So that was very cool. So I love seeing the work that TSM has clearly put in, because they also didn't change their composition once in the entire tournament, except in the one map on Bind in the finals as an adjustment to the way T1 were playing, because it didn't work out in the first map. So yeah, props to TSM. I felt like they played super well.
I want to definitely go deep with TSM and T1 when we touch on the North American region, and I want to talk a little bit about the Latin American region as well. This is, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't know anybody on here. Maybe Scipinho from PUBG and maybe some other names that I might see on Twitch now and again. But this is a region that is super interesting. Now, Brazil over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years. And I mean, Brazil are fanatical sports fans as it is, but when it comes to FPS games specifically, they're bananas. And a lot of that has to do with their Counter-Strike presence. Obviously, a lot of famous teams, a lot of successful teams in Counter-Strike with Brazilian players. And at this stage now, do you think that Velly, do you think that Valorant is going to have the same reach in Brazil? And I know, obviously, in Rainbow Six, your stomping grounds, Brazil is a big player there as well. Do you think that we're going to see the same level of fanaticism for Valorant as we've seen for other titles in places like throughout Latin America, or specifically Brazil?
Let me say this. If Valorant isn't big in Latin America and Brazil especially, then that means that Riot went out of their way to try their hardest to make it not be as successful as it can be. You take a look at Rainbow Six, I mean, the Brazilian streams event time, they get 40K, 1,000+ viewers just on a single stream. And that's just off of a third-party stream, okay? Their numbers are big, whether it's CS, whether it's Rainbow Six, whatever it may be. I don't see LATAM and Brazil slacking when it comes to just providing numbers, whether it's the player base or viewership at all. If this game does not make a huge push in Brazil, they're doing it wrong. Create your Brazilian superstars and then go big after that. They're going to prosper, definitely, if they go with that strategy.
Daniel, do you think that Latin America or even Brazil is going to be like, is it an emerging market for FPS games, or is it a solid market? Is this something that it's on Riot, as Velly just said, to go in and capture a market that exists, or do they still need to create and foster it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that the market definitely exists, as Velly says. These guys are fanatical when it comes to sports in general, but FPS in particular. The Counter-Strike scene is really insane how much passion there is behind it. And I think it's really interesting how it's also being galvanized by, firstly, sort of, let's say, the celebrity of Fallen. and also the fact that Fallen, has very strong relationships with certain extremely famous football players from Brazil, and obviously that football or soccer is an incredibly huge
So
deal also
cool.
in Brazil. So like being able to marry across these worlds, Brazil's done that really effectively, and in a way actually makes it look way more impressive than a lot of the things we've seen in the West, otherwise in Europe or in North America. So I've been really impressed by that, and I think one of the things that always held them back in terms of their performance despite their numbers is just the language barrier. I think that's always going to be the big one. We have so many resources and at this point better internet connections so that we can all, like in North America, you can play East Coast to West Coast, although the pings maybe be a little bit rubbish, but you can do it. You can even play in Europe if you want. Ultimately, you wouldn't want to do that competitively, but the point is that we've always had in Europe and North America, we've always had since the beginning of Counter-Strike, we've always had the best scenes. Ultimately, we've always had the biggest pools of most competitive teams and players, and the only separation is just really language, and they don't have, the Brazilian teams and so on don't have as many resources as we do because of these reasons, and they don't get to play with a lot of these teams as we get to benefit from as much as we do. So I think that's going to change because this game is going to be truly global, and I think Riot's going to do my prediction is they'll do a very, very good job in fostering these scenes and bridging those gaps that have existed due to the language barriers. I think Asia's the same reason that they lag behind. I think it's all to do with the language barriers, and I think that this is going to this game is really going to. I mean, I think the purpose is to capture the global market. I think the way that they've designed everything from the art to the sound to everything is built that way. So I would be super surprised if they don't achieve that objective.
I think it would be extremely important to see how their structure is for esports. Definitely, how are the national leagues going to look? That's going to play such a big role in not only Latin America and the APAC scene, but also even Europe. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at stuff like that, they need to really harp on that. They're doing good with League. Also, I would love to see a developer come out and an esports title and really start to highlight their pro players in the regions that they're in. I mean, what better way than to make a superstar out of a player in Japan? That way he can reach out to the masses, give him that spotlight, give him that platform, put out a video on your Twitter or whatnot. Make sure you put something in the game form. Same thing with Brazil. You do that, the fans are going to eat it up, man. You got to show love in order to get it back.
I think Riot gets it too. I mean, they have arguably, not they, but I mean, Faker is I'm gonna probably call him the biggest esports personality in the world.
Yes.
I don't think that you get much bigger than him. But I think when looking at the Faker model is you have the superstar, but I think because Brazil, Latin America is such a competitive driven region, it doesn't really matter what you're playing. And you kind of touched on that with the football crossover. It doesn't matter. Like if you're winning, people are going to pay attention to you. And I think that's what's going to be most important for Brazil is kind of putting the best roster forward eventually to compete. And obviously it's going to be up to Riot then to have the environment where they can meet with other high level players or important players or tournaments. So the international aspect, again, which DDK covered, is both extremely important, but also must be executed well for it to actually breed that level of world interest where you have everybody interest, not just in North America and the TSMs and double lifts and what have you, but the Brazilians, the Japanese, and specifically Korea, which I think is a nice segue into this next bit. The Japanese, and Korean rivals went off as well. The biggest standouts in these tournaments specifically is the presence of former Overwatch League players. Sabagod and Ryujong, I'm going to butcher their names regardless, but they were involved in playing Team Bakemon, I believe, won the Japanese rivals.
Suzuki looks so fly.
Yeah, he's he has like a nice. It's his magazine like friend. Editorial photo. Yeah, he's like, I have cognac waiting for me in the back room. Would you like to join me? Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is again a region where I'm not going to know anyone to say for some of the guys that have been poked out here, but I think that Korea specifically is a critical market. Japan has always been interesting. They're always involved, but never at the top, unless it's fighting games and that kind of thing. But Korea, I think, is just going to be the big question here, and I'll start again with you, Velly. How important, and this is just a layup, but how important is Korea here in the Riot ecosystem, and specifically Valorant, where Overwatch League has kind of been the tail of specifically Asian region FPS games?
What? Riot is in the best position of all time for an esport that's just starting. The fact that you have two former Overwatch League players that are now playing your game and they want to take it in a competitive way. I mean, that the advertisement is just there. It's free, you know? So if they're able to do that, big. I was unfortunately now on the list to go to Japan when we had our major there last year. But one thing I will tell you is that those fans, they love and adore esports. Those fans, they're waiting for that big name to come out of their region for them to praise and, back behind, get back behind them as well and be a part of their fan base. So it's just all about what orgs really wants to look in to that region. I feel like that's going to be important as well, because orgs are looking for just, the big names, the top teams, NA, EU are the focus with LATAM right behind them. Everybody really ignores APAC. Everybody ignores Korea and Japan. So the first org that does that, they're going to have to be big. Their ways of advertisement are going to have to be big as well. And if they do that, I feel like Valorant can be one of the few FPS games that can really capture that audience, because right now it has been mastered by anybody.
DDK, I'm going to give you the university level kind of essay question here that just kind of pops into my head. A big thing with Korean esports, specifically in FPS games, and in general, has been their fandom. I think the fans in Korea are what drives and what just kind of drives everything in the region. Do you think that Riot has the ability to capture and channel fans into their game in the same way that Overwatch did?
I think so. I think a lot of this does come down to the system in which they approach things. And if we have anything to go off of with their franchise systems with League of Legends and so on, and obviously Overwatch League is a franchise system as well, this does serve to really create one focal point. And that's really important in terms of elevating players and personalities. That's a huge bonus. If you look at something like CSGO, where we have this kind of open free market system, it's really hard as a fan to really understand what everything means in the grand scheme of things. And if you want to be a casual fan, there's a lot of separation between what you want to consume versus a hardcore fan. But in the franchise leagues, it's pretty much all the same stuff. It's like you're all, as a hardcore fan, maybe you'll watch more games, but it's all building up to that big event. And similarly, if you're a casual fan, maybe you'll just watch the big event, but you're still going to get the same kind of payoffs as the casual fans. And I think that's a really huge idea. You got to have efficiency behind how you direct the eyes and attention of the fans to really build those brands of the players and to make people want to invest in them. And also on top of that, you have a more consistent driver in terms of team identity and also content that can be made around these players, as the storylines are, again, much more, they just make a lot more sense together. So that's a really big plus of like a franchise model, I would say. And I think in those regions in particular, I completely agree. It's a really big deal, especially in Japan also. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Japan has always had an issue, sadly, with their esports, because it's very hard to just have a competition where here is some money to win this video game competition. Because I think there's like laws there where it basically is considered gambling, and they have like very strict policies against gambling. So I don't know if a franchise system, a franchise league that has if you can get a contract and be signed as a professional player, I would imagine that would solve some of those issues. I'm not like an expert on that, but I would imagine that that's by far the best format for Asia. So I totally expect that we'll see an incredible leverage of the fandom in Asia, in the Asian markets. And I'm hoping that globally, we're not going to have this situation with CSGO whereby it's just pockets of the world where it's kind of based in. And although Brazil's a big component and Asia, is ultimately a pretty big component, they're almost tangential to some extent, on the peripheral a little bit too much. And I think that Riot have the ability here to really make everything kind of tie in together. So I think they're going to do a good job with that.
Velly, looking at the overall kind of franchise discussion, when do you think, and this is just short answer because no one really knows, do you think that we see like a rush to the franchise model? And this is kind of getting away from the rival stuff. We'll get onto the North American groups here in a second. But do you think that there's going to be a rush towards that franchise model for Riot because they're so familiar with it?
I don't know. I'm not educated enough to say. I really don't know. But what I do see is that franchising is everywhere now. You take a look at Call of Duty, you take a look at Rainbow Six now, you take a look at a lot of other games out there, and franchising seems to be the thing. Because, in my opinion, I personally feel like it offers a lot more stability with the orgs and the teams as well. But looking at Riot's history, maybe I can see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of expect to see it in the next. Well, I mean, this year is kind of a wash. I don't think anything's
Kinda
happening
has
this
to
year
happen.
at all. So I mean, I kind of look at the next year, 2021, and then maybe 2022 being that kind of maybe they start talking about it or showcasing their plans or the org owners start hearing about it. Before we get away from
Yeah.
Korea, a team I've never heard about signed a bunch of players I've never heard of either. So let's take a look about this team, Vision Strikers. They have 2 coaches and what appears to be 7 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 indeed players on their Valorant roster.
Sign them all.
Nice job, everybody. Great job, Vision Strikers. I'm super excited to see what happens.
I do recognize one of the names. I think Stax played for MVP in CSGO.
Okay.
There's a Korean player that played for MVP. I don't know any of the other names, though. That's the
Fair
only one I'm
enough.
familiar with.
They shout out to Vision Strikers.
Totally.
They're on my radar. Let me tell you what. And obviously no disrespect. I have no idea who any of them are. It's not a big deal. Let's talk about Twitch Rivals North America. This is we touched on this a little bit. This is where you're going to see most of the people because obviously I live in a bubble where I only know 10 people total. So the big ones here, obviously TSM is there. Tens was in there as well, and T1. Those were the big. Shout out to everybody else in here. There's like the team Asu has Elise, Shazam, Zoms, Dapper, and Asu on their team. That's a good team. Hiko playing with, I believe that looks like the Gen G team guys. Or a mix of, yep. Yeah. And then, there's some great names in here. A lot of Overwatch players. Sinatra playing with Corey and Dizzy. So a lot of the guys that we've been talking about in the North American Valorant scene were present here. But again, I have to put a big old caveat on the shout out to ST Peach, by the way, who is that's I hate to use her as the leverage into this discussion, but I promise you that ST Peach is not gonna be putting in the hours of the Flom and the Haze and those types of guys. So this is kind of the competitive integrity aspect of Rivals that kind of throws a big wrench into the competitive discussion of it, which is the people that are really going to be owning in Valorant, the people that are sweating it out are not going to be playing in Rivals. And no bigger example comes then from where TSM's roster had to play, and not had to play, but obviously Myth basically was the invited Rivals player, which is how it works. They invite a player, and then they build their teams based on it's a pickup game. Whoever gets the best players, that's who they get. So obviously Myth and company playing with everybody on their pro roster that they just signed, save for their IGL, I believe. I'll let DDK take over because he was the one watching this. What do you think? Is it a little bit awkward to have the IGL replaced by I said I'm going to call him an influencer. He's a pro gamer, but Myth is an influencer first and foremost, and a brand new signed roster would love to come in and play as a unit, and that didn't happen with TSM. What are your thoughts on that, DDK?
Yeah, I think in many respects they definitely have like a core set of ideas in how they play the game, regardless of any specifics that Haze might impact in terms of mid-round calls and stuff and so on and so forth. But the overall structure was clearly there in terms of like as I mentioned, TSM, they ran the same composition at every single map that I saw, except one map, which was a response to that composition being a little bit figured out by T1, which was actually on Bind. Is actually this map, in fact. So this map, Wardell was running the Jet, and Wardell, if he gets the space, and by the way, he will move around the entire map. He'll play pretty much every single position. You never know where he's going to be with his operator. Every time it's a different angle, a different push. That's really powerful against a lot of players and teams, especially in a competition like Rivals, where you don't have these teams, who are playing as a professional in a professional setting or anything like that. So he was able to abuse that massively. T1 were the only team able to stop that, and it was only on binds that they were able to stop that. And then that forced Wardell to pick Sova instead. And that's maybe something we can talk about a little bit later. But ultimately, you know, T1, I think they won't be as happy with their result, because ultimately it was a really close finals and it went down to the wire. Like, TSM with Myth could absolutely have won this game. It was pretty much round for round towards the end, and it did seem like T1 did get it just off of the back of just having having an extra player that is actually a professional in this game. So
Right.
ultimately, these were the two main teams, and everybody else was just basically running random playbooks that they just were coming up with on the fly, as you'd expect.
Kind of the rivals MO is just, you know, throw it at the wall, see what sticks. And I'll kind of turn the away from TSM. Obviously, it's rivals. Okay, so let's kind of we'll use that as the mainstay in this discussion. But let's look at T1. Velly, they win the tournament, okay, but that it's almost the worst tournament you can win if you're T1. If you lose, you lost a streamer tournament as a professional player. If you as a professional team, I should say. If you win, you styled on a bunch of streamers and people who don't play the game professionally. And then it also sets T1 up for their next thing, whatever it might be. Say they go into I'll use this term loosely, real tournament, and they don't perform, which has been kind of the nature we've seen some of these teams facing early on. Is that am I stressed out if I'm T1? Like, do I want to be showcasing in rivals?
Yes, you want to showcase some rivals because money is always good in your pocket, but also at the same time, no. Yeah, the games were close, and I watched that finals. And as a competitor, when you're going against people that are lesser than you have Myth coming at you with the Omen throwing all these orbs and disappearing and all. You kind of have a lax mentality. You don't really go as hard as you usually would. You won't go balls against the wall. I mean, for instance, on the first map, T1 went 10-2, and then the game ended close. they won a lot more rounds. So it could be their lax play style, or maybe Team Myth, they had the upper hand against them. Still, there is no guaranteed way to call out the best players of the best team in this game yet, because we have yet to have a serious, real try-hard sweat tournament. And I'm waiting for some TO to do it already, because, hey, it has to happen at this point. We need to know who the best of the best are. In the meantime, I still want to give a shout out to Myth. I love him to death. He's a great streamer. But that really wasn't competitive. It was competitive. I also put down in my notes that Drone, Myth, and Sub Rosa, they went 10-34 at half. That can't happen. And with that being in the back of your mind, you start to question, okay, did T1 start to sandbag later on in that game, which is what I think happened.
Like, you think they were just kind of,
they let loose. They let off the gas pedal.
Yeah. Okay.
They're like, oh, we got this.
Interesting. And I don't want to say that, and we're focusing mostly on the finals right now, but I think the real story is before the finals, where, like T1 is going to march through that bracket. I think look, there's a lot of talented teams in there, but a lot of them are going to be playing in this rivals, and then they're never going to they're probably never going to feel that same roster again, maybe, say for maybe a few exceptions. So, Daniel, what do you think about the, I guess I'll turn the back half of the question asked to Velly back to you. Is T1 in a position where they feel like, are they using rivals as like, hey, we just won this, or like, hey, nice, we won rivals?
I think it's kind of this like, what's the best way to put it? I feel like they're
like winning bingo on Thursday. Like, I won bingo on Thursday. What do you know? It's great. Yeah. I got a freaking microwave.
I think they're basically just kind of paying tribute. Basically, they're just in a position where they have a full roster. They've got a lot of big name streamers, obviously, Braxton, Skadil, chief amongst those, and they're just getting, I think, exposure for the org. The sandbagging argument is an interesting one. I want to believe that that's true because, ultimately they should have better playbooks. They have better players. They have, like, even, if you look at it from a Counter-Strike perspective, if you just look one for one across, better Counter-Strike players. A lot of the TSM players, obviously Hayes wasn't playing, but, they were, I don't just call them, I don't like using the term washed up loosely, but they disappeared from the top level again for a reason. and they were not able to keep up for what. And it might be because they didn't want to put the time in, because whatever it might be. But they had their run with CLG, as many people are familiar with. So Bros and Wardell definitely up and coming talents, and they showed off that they have a lot of skill. But I will draw a comparison to for those people that ever follow StarCraft. I don't know if you guys are StarCraft people, but in StarCraft 2, we had this situation where, yeah, we've got all these StarCraft 2 players and they're already great. We've got all of our tournaments and everything's really cool. But then eventually, we all know the Koreans are coming, and so and not just the Koreans, because the Koreans came over, but we're talking about the Koreans who were playing
Koreans in StarCraft? That's
in Brood War. Yeah, like the real serious guys, like your Flashes, your Jaedongs, like the MVPs, like these people that are super legit at the most elite level in Korea. So I do wonder if we're kind of going to be in for something like this, where, for example, like we saw, Elite, we saw Stewie, we saw some like tier 1 CS:GO players and some tier 1 players from other games as well. Like you had Sinatra and Corey and so on from Overwatch and so on and so forth. I do wonder when we get enough of a value proposition, let's say like the Riot's like, yeah, we're going to start franchising, we're going to start paying teams loads of money. Will there be an argument to have a lot of these really, really, really hot CS players, and then at that point we'll understand who the hot up and coming new players are? Will all of these people then fade to obscurity? I do kind of wonder. However, T1, I think they're sort of just playing lip service a little bit. They've just signed an org, get some exposure, use this as just like a fun tournament, just to try out some stuff. I think that's ultimately the goal. Just take it as as lightly as possible in that way. But I hope that they are developing their playbook like Fish123 is. If they're doing what Fish123 are doing, they should be fine. But we'll time will tell, I suppose. We need some big competitions. We need a series of big competitions so we can have a professional meta begin to get set, because it doesn't really exist yet.
That's it. I mean, there's no way to really go beyond the fact that we don't have the real tournaments yet, and we will someday. But I personally believe, at least with a T1, that if they take the game, and Fish123 is a great example. We talked to Sliggy last week about their methods when it comes to coaching and setting up strats and practice and that kind of thing. I think that the biggest issue that T1 is going to face is that they have this streaming cushion. And I think this is a very broad statement. I'm not speaking on the mental state of any of these guys that I might mention by name, but I think about boxers. I think about these guys who are on the come up, and this is why I kind of talked about Rivals as a non-competitive environment in the purest sense. Is that the guys that are doing sit-ups in their basement proverbially are not in Rivals. So if I'm Brax, if I'm Myth, if I'm these guys, it's never gonna be, well, maybe not never, but Brax specifically, because he's not had a great last couple of years as far as competition is concerned. But I have to question eventually where the real serious Valorant pros are at right now. They like guys like High Ground Fish123, the guys that never made it to that Brax level. They're starving. They are literally starving out there right now, and they'll be coming for these T1 teams. And even some of these smaller tournaments we've seen where like Sentinels, for instance, they've been going out in like semifinals or group stage or whatever you want to call it. There hasn't been a lot of movement for some of these big name teams yet. But let's move a little bit forward to Europe and carry on this conversation in the context of the European rivals. Again, some big names in here that I'm sure you can recognize off of Twitch. But again, this is more of the same here. Any standouts for you here, Velly, as far as you can see?
Not one person on this list, man.
Shout out to Lothar. I'm pals with Lothar, but he actually Zippin was a guy that through beta. I can't remember what his in-game name was, but he was winning some tournaments. Noisy was there as well. This is a team that's been playing together a little bit, hasn't been at the same level of success. But I'll kind of leave it to you, DDK. This CNED, I'm not sure how you say it. This was a guy that was really going off in Rivals. Do we know anything about this gentleman?
I'm actually not familiar with him, but I did see him on all of the stats, just blowing everybody up. So I guess he's doing something well. And obviously, I think it's with Jet that he's been playing. I think mostly, from what I understand. So Jet is actually, I think, super good right now, especially like the buff to the smokes, but also just the amount of ways that if you are mechanically very good, you can use Jet to your advantage is actually very, very impressive. So I'm not too surprised to see a name I don't understand playing Jet and owning people. So I'll leave it there.
So eventually the tournament did come to a head with Team On-Screen and Team Mixwell going at it in the finals. This is a squad that, at least for On-Screen, is essentially Fish 123, less artists, who was playing, by the way, for Team Mixwell. So they did end up seeing each other regardless of what side they were on in the final. Mixwell's team did eventually win it, and Mixwell had some thoughts on winning the Twitch Rivals European tournament.
How does it feel to win the official Twitch Rivals launch tournament?
Feels amazing, man. Feels amazing. We have such a good group as well, like a group of people in our team. It's not only that we're winning, it's that we're having fun. I don't know if you can tell, but it's been insane.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of times we tune into your viewpoint or Scream's viewpoint, and Scream's just going, yeah, oh yeah, just, run down B, I'll just hit their heads, it's fine, he's just gonna hit all of those shots. It feels a lot like you guys are, you have some executes, you have some set plays, but you're kind of just playing the game and relying on your aim to win you these maps. Do you think that you're gonna develop into like a more cohesive execution-based Valorant team, or will you keep relying on just hitting those heads?
I mean, right now we're not a team. We're just a group of players that play together these Twitch Rivals. They are friends of mine, and I'm the captain. So I don't know if we will stick together, but if we stick together, we have to play much more like using team play, because in the future, Valorant will not be like this. We cannot rely on our skill in the future as much as we're doing it now, I think.
I for one know that Sliggy would be seeing Mixwell in a dark alleyway if he tried to snipe artists away from him. So I don't know, but obviously Mixwell is just kind of doing it for the cast and talking about just being broad. But I don't expect that team to stay together. But shout out to Mixwell, obviously a tremendously talented CS:GO player, and has been just a mainstay in that community for so long. So happy to see him winning some cash along with his compadres in that situation. So now that we've got all the winners and everything kind of dealt with, Velly, closing thoughts on the Rivals tournament, looking at this last, it was 2-0 by the way for Mixwell. So that's unfortunate turn of events there in the final, but overall thoughts on Rivals. What is your biggest takeaways?
My biggest takeaway is that ST Peach walked away with more money than Hiko and the rest of the Gen G roster. That's something I never expected, but she did it, and hey, shout out to her. Other than that, what we see right now in Valorant, we can only take it at face value, grain of salt. None of this stuff is going to stick. Like DDK said, give us a real tournament, man. No, real prize pool, something to really bring out your strats for. We need to start evolving the game. And the best way to do it is by throwing competition at these guys. Twitch Rivals, they're doing a fantastic job. I kind of wish they had a separate tournament for content creators and pro players. But other than that, give me something real to look at, because I can't wait. We haven't seen the real potential of Valorant yet. And that's what's stopping us.
DDK, final thoughts on the Rivals tournaments.
I have to say, with the expectations of what a Twitch Rivals can bring, I was actually pretty happily surprised by some of the skill that I saw. I felt like it was really interesting to see some of to see T1 and to see where they're at and see how serious they are, and whether or not they're sandbagging. I'm pretty hyped to see what they're able to do in the space. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we are yet to see in this game, and I just really want to get there, just like Velly was saying, and I also love the contrast of different approaches. Yeah, exactly, absolutely, yeah. And hopefully we can fast forward through COVID as well, so we can all actually do this in person sometime as well. That'd be great. But yeah, so I'm just hyped, man. I'm just like super hyped to see what T1 can do in the future, as they were like the only roster. I want to see also if Wardell can actually stay relevant and actually keep growing as a star. I'm really curious about this, because again, it's like we don't really have the proper litmus test for this just yet. So yeah, it's just I just feel like I was just left with more questions with with Twitch Rivals ultimately.
We are in like the episode 1 of The Wire level of Valorant right now, where it's just I don't know if that's too deep, but I mean, like, if you can get past this stage, there's more good stuff to come, and I think we're we're gonna have to put a pin in it there. DDK and Velly, thank you guys so much for joining us here this week. It was an absolute pleasure. Be sure to check these guys out on Twitter. DDK, you're gonna follow them at DDK Esports and VellyCast on Twitter as well. Both these guys you'll be seeing in the future in both CS:GO and Rainbow Six tournaments. Don't forget to follow Do Not Peak on Twitter and Twitch, as well as on YouTube at Do Not Peak Entertainment. I am WTFmoses. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific. And until then, we'll see you guys out there. Have a great week, everybody.